and today I'm going to be talking about Greg Davies' new sitcom, The Cleaner. I'm going to be looking at kind of how good it is as a show by itself, and also it's a remake, so I'm going to be discussing how good of a remake it is. It is a bit different to the other remake videos I've done because the original is a German show, and I could only find the first episode that had English translation, so yeah, I could only watch the first episode in full, and then I've kind of like looked at episode descriptions to get a feel for like kind of the plot lines that they did, and also just kind of looked at the kind of visual aspects of the original. Yeah, and I thought it was only fair to talk about it as a remake because I always judge kind of remakes of British shows. I think it's only fair to look at it and compare it to the original. So both the German original and the UK remake follow the same kind of basic plot. So the crime scene cleaner goes to a house, cleans up a crime scene, and in the process begins talking to one or two people. So it could be a neighbour or a relative, or sometimes even like the murderer. And yeah, so they kind of like discussion, and it's supposed to be kind of like a very dark comedy. One thing I will say is that the German definitely seems a lot darker and kind of a lot more like grey and kind of morbid than the UK one, which we'll get into a bit in a second. So as I said, I only watched the first episode of the German one, and it is a lot more like mature and, as I said, morbid. So the first episode, the main character goes to a crime scene, obviously, and while he's cleaning up, a prostitute comes in, as this is one of her clients, and they begin discussing kind of their unusual jobs, and in the process also he solicits a sexual act from her, and they kind of he struggles with kind of how inappropriate it is to be soliciting sex acts while in a dead person's house. It really pushes the boundaries of what's kind of considered appropriate, and it's a lot more kind of like secondhand embarrassment, I find, than in the UK one, because he like puts on the dead guy's like aftershave and like underpants, and they both struggle with working out whether this is an okay thing to do, which obviously it's not. But yeah, it was entertaining. I definitely enjoyed it, but it definitely does have a different feel to the UK one. So let's look at what they changed. So as I said before, the German one is a lot duller, a lot greyer, whereas the UK one is a lot more colourful and brighter and vibrant, which is very different to what we normally see with remakes. We normally see the British version being the dull, grey, sombre one, and then the remake, typically the American remake, putting a lot more colours in, making it brighter and more kind of like entertaining, or not entertaining, that's the wrong word, but more just like visually bright and stimulating. Yeah, so it's very different to what we normally see, but I don't think the UK one goes too far. Most episodes, or a few episodes where it's like very, very bright, like lots of visuals going on, where normally the UK comedy is kind of like a lot plainer and focuses more on the jokes more than the visuals, whereas I say like American remakes, for some of them tend to go for the visuals more. So it's a weird change. I would have thought that it would have been the same kind of visuals as it, because you know the UK is known for the kind of dull, monotone comedy, and on that aspect I would say the German one definitely shows the monotony of it a lot more than the UK one, with the way that it's filmed and done. There's less music, so it shows kind of like how long the day is, whereas with the UK one there's a lot more music, it's a bit more upbeat, and the kind of monotony has come through when Wiki, who is Greg Davies, he comes in and he's like, oh my god, this is going to take forever to clean, and the German one is a bit more subtle with all of that. And yeah, just the tone of the German one is a lot more like sombre and like melancholic, and yeah, it's different. It's very odd. I would say the UK one definitely is a bit more sillier. Yeah, it's definitely a lot sillier. I think the UK one is a lot sillier, I would say. It definitely has that kind of like Greg Davies feel to it that we see with like Man Down and Cuckoo. It's a bit like sarcastic and yeah, it's silly, a little bit of like slapstick in it as well, whereas the German one isn't very slapstick at all. It goes kind of like to those inappropriate things that like slapstick does, but it's a completely different tone. The German one is definitely a lot more realistic in its like portrayal of it. This, like I said, the main guy being someone who just cleans up crimes, it's his job, and then kind of gets drawn into these people's lives and testing out his morals a bit, and he's obviously, I would say he's definitely more immoral than Greg Davies's character is, because again, that they kind of push it as well, so I'll get onto that in a second. The main character in the German one is way more inappropriate with like his work, and I would say more socially awkward, and I definitely get more secondhand embarrassment, kind of like cringe from it, in a good way, I would say, because that is the point of it. So that's pretty much most of the things they changed. I would say the biggest thing that they changed is just the visual aspects to it. The UK one is just a lot brighter, a bit more like visually stimulating. And so that's pretty much everything they changed. But yeah, so let's get on to what they kept the same. And there is quite a lot. So it keeps the anthology format. So each episode is like mostly self-contained, which I was a bit disappointed at first because it meant that Helena Bonham Carter and David Mitchell weren't going to be recurring characters. They are just in it for one episode. Each episode he meets somebody different and the episodes revolve around that. And yeah, as I said, the format is exactly the same. So Wiki goes to clean a crime scene and then meets somebody like the murderer or a relative, and yeah, it definitely focuses on kind of like learning different people's stories. There's lots of weird twists in the episodes. Again, I can't really comment on the German ones beside the first episode, but I would say the UK one definitely focuses a bit more on the twists, but just from the first episode it did seem a lot more subtle of kind of like the way the story progresses, whereas the UK one kind of has more sharper twists to it. Both main characters also have to use their moral compass when it comes to things. So again, in the first episode, the German one, he's trying to work out whether or not it's appropriate to sleep with this woman in the crime scene, which obviously it's not. And then in the UK one, Wiki has to work out whether it's okay to accept this car that he loves in exchange for not telling people that this woman killed. Wiki definitely has a stronger moral compass than the main character in the German one. He turns people in, he makes his standards like, I can't let you get away with it, and definitely focuses a bit more on, not investigation, but that kind of aspect to it, because neither of them focus on like the actual crime. It's more of like the cleanup and the other people affected by it. But I would say the UK one definitely does edge onto that kind of like mystery aspect to it, and I figuring out why people did it if it wasn't murder, and even solving a murder in the Aristocrat episode. On that point, there were some copies of plots I don't really like. I think it's, again, as I said with like remakes of other shows, I understand why they've copied plots, but I do find it a little bit unoriginal. But it's not the end of the world as long as it's done well. So the German episode Above the Clouds is exactly the same as the first episode of the UK one, obviously with a few differences. So I think it's a man that's the murderer and not a woman. But again, it's kind of the same plot. They seem like they're becoming friendly and then the police come right at the end. And then the Not on My Sofa episode in the German one is exactly the same as the Aristocrat, even due to the way that like the burglar dies and the main woman dies. It's, yeah, very, very similar. However, I will say that the UK one does introduce different, as I said, more like modern plots, like the influencer episode. And the main characters are both a little bit socially awkward, inappropriate, but also kind of like smart asses and like very knowledgeable in their jobs and they know it. And I like the fact that they both emphasise that they're not cleaners, they're crime scene cleaners. Definitely is interesting to see how much of an expert they are in this kind of thing. I wonder if it's accurate, the way that they describe how to like clean up blood and stuff like that. It's interesting. I don't know whether it is very accurate, but it sounds good. It sounds like it's scientific. So, do I like it? Do I think it's a good remake? So I did like it. I was invested throughout the whole series. There's only like 6 episodes, but it's definitely not my favourite show. I will be watching any other series they do, and I do hope it does get renewed, because I definitely feel like we could get it's kind of the show that would get stronger as the main character develops. I love the fact that we've got one consistent main character throughout the whole series, and I think that Greg Davies does a good job of it. You need somebody that is very kind of like strong in the character, and I think he's definitely built his character up very well, and we can see him kind of mature a bit in the first series and kind of come to terms with a few like facts that he doesn't really want to come to terms with. However, I did find that sometimes it struggled to find the balance between the dark, serious humour and kind of like the silliness of it. And yeah, as I said, I didn't like the fact how they copied some episodes like directly. I would have preferred like more original. However, the 2 episodes that they did copy were very, very strong episodes, and I think they did do, you know, a good job at kind of adding to it and changing it up a bit from, again, this is just from what I've read of the descriptions of the episodes, because I couldn't watch them as, again, no English translation. On to Greg's character again, I think he did a really good job of not copying, but taking the essentials of the original character and making it his own. So you've got the same things where it's like he's good at his job, and he, you know, he's a bit kind of socially unaware sometimes and can like embarrass himself and like be a bit cringy sometimes, but then he's also his own character. It's very Greg Davies. He was entertaining the entire way through. Yeah, and the UK one, I would say definitely, you know, it uses like literal toilet humour in the first episode, which I'm not really a fan of. Yeah, it definitely were some moments where it really surprised me. So when the influencer episode started, I was imagining it to be kind of like very cringy, and when kind of like big broadcasters make kind of like parodies and stuff of internet influencers, it normally comes across as like patronising and just kind of like blatantly like making fun of people, whereas this, I think it does a really, really, really good job of, you know, making fun of how far people go, because in this episode the character he meets is an influencer, and after a guy dies in his home, he wants to keep the crime scene there so he can kind of vlog it and live stream it actually. And so they do make fun of how ridiculous that is, like out of context of the internet, but then it also makes a really good point of showing like why people are drawn to the internet in that way, and how much people rely on it for an income, and how kind of desperate they are, and how like just toxic the industry is, and how this is not a fault of the people really participating in it, but a fault of the people facilitating it and advertising it and pushing this content. And then they also do make a kind of like you're cancelled joke, but I definitely think it comes across a lot better than other things we've seen, like comedians complaining about being like cancelled, whereas this, it's like, you've done something, you've gone too far in this, that we are not funding you anymore. So yeah, I think that episode was very good. Again, it was very bright. The character he meets was very obsessed with the 80s, so it definitely got that feel to it. But yeah, I did enjoy the series, and I think it's a good remake. Again, my opinion might be different if I managed to watch the whole of the German one, but I would say it's a pretty good remake in the way that it keeps the essentials but also does mix it up a bit. But I was surprised that it didn't keep that very kind of like grey, dark tone to it, as that is kind of like a lot of British humour. But nevertheless, it worked very well. It's not my favourite show, but yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you liked about the show, or if you liked it and if it's a good remake, and give the video a like if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!